Hi, everybody. This is Melissa again from Jamesbeck. I'm here with Michael Hoeppner, founder of GK Training, and this is our fourth and final series in communication. Thanks again, Michael, so much for spending time with us. This has been super helpful. This segment is about the cold call. To cold call or not to cold call? Have cold calling gone by the way of the dodo bird? Is it still useful? Is it something people should be doing, or should we be resorting to other avenues to do initial outreach?
Mm-hmm. This is an answer I'm going to give, which is very much a case-by-case basis. And I'll tell you why, because this is changing all the time. If you see the increase of robocalls and how much a nuisance that has become for people, that actually is, there's a sort of inverse graph happening where the more robocalls happen, the fewer folks actually answer their phone. So instead of giving you a pat answer of like, yes, you should cold call, no, you shouldn't, I actually invite you to do something a bit liberating, which is I want you to think about this simply as a function of time. And ask yourself, what is the most efficient place to put my time? I'm not saying you can take cold calling off the table. You probably can't. But get real with yourself about how effective it is or is not. And by the way, when you ask yourself that question, you might come up with a result of like, yeah, it's really challenging, but guess what? It's still high enough efficiency that I have to make it part of my day or my week. So think a little bit just about the time efficiency of it, knowing that it's getting more and more challenging sometimes to break through. Now, there's a caveat with that. During this global pandemic that we're all in the midst of course, our email inboxes have been exploding with everything coronavirus related. Our phones are blowing up. There's all this media happening all the time. This is shifting quickly. So it may be that even within 6 weeks or 12 weeks, people are actually more prone to pick up the phone and less prone to respond via email. So what that means is you have to be agile and keep trying multiple channels all the time. I like to give people a silly comparison with this, and I hope you all take it the right way. But my mom is a wonderful person, and she does tend to try to reach me multiple ways. I am not as good a communicator as my mom is. And so what happens is sometimes I blow her off on one channel, but then I think, I got to call my mom. So my mom has become very adept at texting me sometimes, and then emailing sometimes, but then calling, and then FaceTime sometimes where I have to see, it's a video call. She's become very good at this. So that same sort of paradigm of continually trying different channels over and over again in a gentle way, because you don't know which one's going to be most effective, and you also don't know which will be the most effective for which person.
I totally hear you on that, because I do find that some candidates respond very quickly to text, but not so much to email. One question I have for you is, I feel as though when you're emailing versus calling somebody, it's not personal, the depersonalization, if that's the right word. I feel like when you're calling them, they almost feel more responsibility to call you back, because it feels like it's more of an effort and it's less of a mass mailing type thing. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, I think it honestly depends a lot on the person. Landlines have really gone the way of the dodo. They might make a comeback though. You never know, because now that robocalls are so prevalent, cell phone reception gets challenging, we're all working from home, landlines might come back. Cell phones, very often, if people call you, it gets dumped into your voicemail. You might not check it for a couple of days. So they might not actually feel more obligation nor less obligation necessarily. So it's a hard one to answer in a black and white way. Really could go both ways depending on the person. What I would suggest is that however you communicate, whether that's via email or via voicemail, the more personal and specific you make it for that person, you want to create a sense of obligation because of how generous you're being with your communication, and not as though you're like nagging or it's obligatory towards them. For instance, if you email someone a couple times, but you keep a good-natured spirit about it and then call them a couple times, they slowly begin to feel a degree of reciprocity. They're like, oh God, I got to get back to that person. But only so long as you keep a good-natured graciousness to how you're communicating.
That makes sense. What is your suggestion around how to approach sales conversations during this tumultuous time?
Yeah. Well, I wrote a column about this, which is there's simply a fork on the road that you have to figure out. It's as simple as, do I want to talk about what's happening in my life and in their life potentially or not? And all I mean by that is, if you ask someone a big, juicy, open-ended question right now in this particular moment in May of 2020, you might get into a very intense conversation quite quickly. That's fine. In fact, that might be important to do, but just know that you're opening up that can of worms. People still are so attuned to saying like, hey, how's it going? Or how are you? And then as soon as those words leave your lips, you're thinking like, oh my gosh, I have no idea how they are. That's a strange question to ask right now, because it is safe to assume that many people are not doing necessarily so great right now. So think about, do you want to open up that conversation or not? And if you don't, that's okay. Then in that case, very clearly set forth that this call is going to be about some very business thing. Thank you so much for taking the time. I recognize you're probably very busy. I won't take up any more of your time than I have to. Let's jump right to it. So very quickly at the beginning of the call, you're cueing to the person, you know what, we're just going to stick to business, and that's okay too.
Yep. I've got a kind of an unexpected question for you that I just thought of during that response. Sorry. I call this time the Corona coaster because I feel like some days you're up and you're happy and you're motivated and you're okay. And other days you're just this malaise, this limbo state is challenging for anybody, but you still have to be on. Any suggestions around how you overcome the down parts of the coaster?
Yeah, I do. You know, we teach 3 primary communication, surprises about good communication. 1, it comes from using more of yourself, not less. 2, it comes from focusing on the other person. And number 3 addresses what you're talking about. You do not need to feel blank in order to project blank. You can put whatever you want in there. Confident, happy, chipper, cheerful, optimistic, whatever you want. So the point is not that you are at the mercy of how you feel. The point is you still have to do your job to marshal your energy to communicate in the manner in which you want. And to do that, put your focus on what you're doing physically, how you're breathing, how you're standing, even how you're enunciating your words, because that will trigger actually a positive feedback loop that if you communicate in that way, weirdly, by the end of the day, you're actually going to feel more optimistic. It's just like an athlete or a dancer using themselves in a very full and expressive way. It actually kickstarts your internal experience as well. And if you don't believe me, by the way, folks, on the Corona coaster, walk around standing like that all day long one day, and then see how you feel at the end of the day. And the next day, walk around the whole day like that, like you're looking at the world like it's your kingdom to devour. At the end of that day, check in with yourself and see how you're feeling that day.
That's very helpful. Thank you so much. Michael, this has been such a pleasure working with you, and I appreciate all the time you've given to us to help our clients. And you're really astounding. You're really great at what you do, and you're so fantastic at being able to articulate your message.
Well, thank you, Melissa. I appreciate that.
Yeah, of course.
It's been fun. I thank you for your time too. It's been a
yeah, no doubt. I've loved it. It's my first time being a newscaster.
Well, maybe you have a future career there too.
Not sure about that. Anyway, take care. Stay healthy.
Okay, you too. Bye-bye.